Afterburner was an arcade phenomenon in the 80s, bringing players an experience that was fast, explosive, and intense. It also showed off the technological gulf between the arcades of the era and the hardware you could take home. Consoles had no hope of matching the smooth scaling and high frame rates of the arcade, meaning that getting the true experience meant heading to your local centre with a pocket full of change. Even years later, systems like the Mega Drive were still unable to deliver an experience on par with the arcade original. You'd have to be some kind of crazy to try to take this sort of experience and decide, yep, sure, I'll do something like that for handheld hardware that hasn't even been released yet. Thankfully, a couple of developers at Epyx were up to the challenge. Thus, Blue Lightning was born. Blue Lightning was released in 1989 for the brand new Atari Lynx. This was a launch title and showed off exactly what Atari's powerful hardware was capable of. With the Lynx, it was no secret that Atari was trying to show up the comparatively limited ceiling of Nintendo's Game Boy. In a similar manner to Sega's upcoming Game Gear, the Atari Lynx boasted more powerful hardware and a colour screen. Blue Lightning took advantage of these benefits to create a game that would have seemed like a reach to pull off on home consoles and PCs of the era, let alone a brand new handheld device. For an artist, it was exciting to have hardware scaling and 4 times as many colours as a PC at that time. We wanted to beat the slime green palette of the Game Boy so bad. Just one artist and an engineer with not much input from the producers made for a lot of freedom to make a game we wanted using the technology available. This freedom was definitely a good thing, as Blue Lightning is a tremendously impressive technical achievement. Using sprite scaling in a similar manner to games like Afterburner, the game environment manages to deliver the illusion of true 3D. Smoke trails snake through the air behind missiles, enemy planes explode into debris as they fall out of the sky, and mountains pass by you as you curve and maneuver your way through them. In fact, that last one represents what might be the most impressive part of the whole package. Not only do you have the air-to-air combat as in Afterburner, but there are also ground-based enemies and other environmental dangers to be aware of. This likely stems from the game's root idea as more of a realistic flight simulator, rather than an arcadey shooter. The programmer, Stephen Landrum, was influenced by Falcon. As such, there was a concept that called for a first-person view and a more realistic approach. Art Koch, the artist, pushed to blend this with the crowd-pleasing gameplay of arcadey titles, particularly Afterburner. The result of this was the additional gameplay elements added to Blue Lightning beyond just shooting the bad guys. It's definitely not a flight sim by any stretch of the imagination, but the wrinkles introduced as a result of this inspiration served to give the game more depth. One of the biggest limitations for the game artistically was the size of the screen and the amount of pixels available for the sprites. Trying to ensure sprites that were detailed enough to be distinguishable at multiple distances was tough for the development team, particularly when environmental details were also part of the frame. On-screen text also needed to be taken into account. I think the developers did a good job working within these restrictions, although occasionally it can be hard to keep track of everything when the action is at its most frantic. Some of what I've been talking about here might seem a bit odd when looking at the game footage on a big screen, when the pixels look massive and the limited colour palette of the Lynx compared to modern hardware becomes apparent. Instead, try to put yourself in the mindset of a player back in the early 90s. This wasn't something you'd be looking at on an arcade cabinet's big screen or on your TV at home. This was something that would be on the much smaller screen of Atari's brand new handheld. The one big drawback to the game is the sound. Outside of the admittedly awesome introduction, there's no real music in the game. All that you're left with are the sound effects, such as the pinging of the lock-on and the whooshes of the missiles flying through the air. It's not really pleasant to listen to at all, and you'd honestly be better served by turning the sound down and putting something else on in the background. Despite this, Blue Lightning is still one of the absolute best Lynx games to have in your collection. It is supremely impressive and must have been mind-blowing when it was released. It definitely makes you wonder what the Lynx may have been capable of, with a little bit more time and love.